Welcome, guys. We are diving into another Thought Exchange masterclass. We're going to be talking about facilitating a live exchange. But before we do that, I want to invite you to join the conversation outside of this virtual event series. If you do on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever your social media of choice is, make sure you're using these hashtags, hashtag TEVE for Thought Exchange virtual events, or hashtag TE Masterclass, because that's what this is, the Masterclass virtual event series. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is use the chat function. Amelia, our amazing and lovely program director, she watches and manages the chat function. And so let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, anything you're hoping to learn from today's virtual event beyond just facilitating a live exchange. We're excited to hear from you. Okay, now I want to introduce you to our engagement coach. Ailsa is a committed community engagement professional with a background in both the non-private and the private sector. From her master's in food security, she learned the importance of engaging all stakeholders to enact change in a community. As an engagement coach, Ailsa collaborates with our thought partners to help them plan purposeful and action-driven engagements with their community. We're so excited that Ailsa, you're going to be taking us through how to facilitate a live exchange. So welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Awesome. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. Our agenda for today, guys, this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about how live exchanges can support your events and meetings in a dynamic way. We're also going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks for leading live exchanges, and then you're going to experience a live exchange yourself, which Ailsa will take us into. So now we're ready to get started. Are you ready, Ailsa?
I'm ready. Yeah. Thank you so much for that introduction, Angela. Like I said, I'm super excited to be here. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I just believe in so much power behind this in terms of leading really dynamic meetings. And so I just wanted to jump right in here. And I wanted to start with the why. And so we've done previous masterclasses on finding your why behind your engagement. And I think this is a really important piece. So why run an exchange live in the room? First of all, it's a really easy and engaging way to gather ideas fast in a group because there's 3 steps that make up an exchange. So in the share step, people respond to your open-ended question. In the star step, they're considering and rating the thoughts of their peers. And then in the discover step, everyone can understand what those emerging priorities are and different perspectives. And so in a room with 100 people with Thought Exchange, you can get more than 100 thoughts shared and more than 1,000 ratings in really a matter of minutes. And by comparison, if you gave each person in that room maybe 5 minutes to share their thoughts out loud, that activity might take more than 8 hours. And you still might not know what matters most to people in the end. And so really setting up an exchange kind of takes 2 shakes, and then you give everyone about 10 minutes to participate, and voila, you've crowdsourced a lot of ideas in a matter of minutes. And one of the most valuable aspects from my perspective around the reason to run an exchange is that it's a really strong way to demonstrate active listening in a meeting. So by running a live exchange, you're really creating the space for moments of reflection for your participants to let their learning sink in and capture what resonates with them. And depending on your topic, it can really serve as a way to carry learnings forward or check in on progress later on. And so, for example, I work with a leader in New York who's having these really great professional development meetings with her team. They had some great insights shared. They were all jazzed up. But when it was over, she was finding it really challenging to kind of have her team action on those discussions and those learnings they were having. And so what she did was she actually ran an exchange at the end of her meeting and asked her administration team, what are some key takeaways from our meeting today, and how will you use them in your day-to-day work? And so what that allowed her to do is close out the session and understand what stuck out to people most while it was fresh on their minds. She could respond to a few of the top ideas in the room. And what she did was at her next professional development meeting, they revisited the results as a team. They threw them up on the big screen, and she asked, how's it going trying to reach these commitments or these new learnings? What else do you need from me to make it happen? And so it's an opportunity to listen and circle back.
That's really great. I love that.
And then there's another piece here around live exchanges can help create space for quiet reflection for introverts and noodlers. And so noodlers are people who like to think things over. And it really allows every voice to be heard. And it's this fundamental idea we have at Thoughtexchange around moving from loud to crowd. So rather than those loudest voices who we know tend to come to all the meetings and speak up the most, every voice can be considered and meaningful conversations can take place. Another piece around why you should run live exchanges is it can completely change the energy in the room. And so especially if you're using our roundtable feature, this feature gets people up and out of their seats into small breakouts to dig in for deeper discussion. It's a great tool for events, large meetings, or any other situation where smaller targeted conversations might benefit the thinking of a larger group. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to demo this today, but I really welcome you to stick around for drop-in office hours immediately after this session to learn more about how this feature can help make your meetings more interactive. Mm-hmm. And then a couple last points here. Running an exchange live in the room, it's transparent. It empowers shared knowledge and shared participant learning, especially in that STAR step where that peer-to-peer learning happens to help level the playing field there. And finally, it can be a really great tool to complement and enhance other facilitation strategies. So for example, you might run an exchange asking people, what are your thoughts or questions about the changes to our hiring and onboarding process? And what you can do is give people time to participate. And then when the results are in, have them pair and share. So turn to your neighbor and discuss what you're seeing in some of these top results here. And then when you give them time to do that, use our handy tools in the Discover dashboard to bring people back to the big group and ask for a brave soul to share some of their insights from their discussion.
Those are all great reasons to run a live exchange. It's funny because we do them so often internally here at Thoughtexchange. I think we forget all of the reasons why they're so beneficial because it just becomes such commonplace. And so having this kind of quantified list of all of the reasons why it's so valuable and why you should consider doing it, I think is really helpful. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm, of course. And so now that we've done the why, I want to dig into the when. So kind of some use cases and ideas for when you could use live exchanges. And so really those use cases are endless. You could use it in team meetings, at larger events or conferences. We do that all the time. Virtual meetings, town halls, and even with students. And so pre-event, we have a lot of leaders that use this to help inform their agenda or their event details. So what are some important topics you'd like to talk about when we meet? This is a really powerful question. It helps you as a leader set your agenda, but it also creates a sense of ownership for participants. It ensures the content is relevant and engaging for them as well. During the event, really powerful to integrate Thoughtexchange there. You could use it as a Q&A for panel discussions or presenters, or use it to crowdsource solutions to an issue or problem your team is tackling. So what questions would you like the panel to address? Or what are some things we could do to address these challenges we've identified today? So really great for digging in deeper. Again, this is where the roundtable feature could be a really great addition to your event to fuel smaller group discussion. Post-event is another great way to use Thoughtexchange. You can gather feedback on the event and capture key learnings and takeaways. So what is your greatest takeaway from today and how will you use it going forward? Or as a result of this event, I will. We use this one commonly with Thoughtexchange events, and it lets people kind of share their commitments and their key learnings. And then last but not least, there's also an opportunity to engage students in the classroom. It can be a really great way to gather student voice and help crystallize those learnings for students. So, what are some of the most important ways we can help you be successful at school? So providing kind of focused classroom time for students to participate really helps them feel heard and valued in that broader conversation you might be having with parents, community, staff, or use it to help further classroom learning. So what are some important things you can't stop thinking about after reading this book, for example?
I remember when I was a teacher, Tila, we would always start the classroom every morning with, a warm up that helped me kind of informally assess what they held on to from the day before's lesson. And so knowing that I would have a tool like Thoughtexchange to really be able to say, what other things did you guys want to discuss, or what do you still have questions about, and having that prioritized list so that I knew really as a whole what the class was still struggling with so that I could help make that day's lesson really meet those needs for them, I think would have been so valuable. So I love the idea of using this as that kind of informal assessment with the students in the classroom setting.
Absolutely. And it's so great for that piece around, so they can share their thoughts, but they're also learning from each other too in that STAR step.
Yeah.
And so what I would say to that is, if you've got an idea for using this with students, or you want to dig in more, reach out to our team, reach out to your engagement coach, your client success manager. We can help you plan that thoughtful engagement to engage students as well. Great. So I've covered the why, we've covered the when and some use cases. What I want to do now is set up a live exchange to show you how easy and fun it can be to gather feedback, and you'll all get to participate as well. And so as I'm setting it up, I'm actually going to take you behind the scenes here and show you some of the steps and some tips and tricks for exchange design.
While you're doing that, Ailsa, we have this question in the chat box from Chad. He's asking, how long should the live exchange remain open, or how long do people need to answer the questions and vote on their thoughts? I think this is perfect segue because you're about to open up an exchange for all of the attendees to do. We usually do these virtual events, and we always run an exchange live during the virtual events. And we usually we recommend, I want to say about 8 to 10 minutes for a live exchange, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that, Ailsa, as you start to build this exchange.
Yeah, that's great. We can dig into that a little bit more, but I think 8 to 10 minutes is a good rule of thumb. And it will always depend on the size of your group. So if you've got 150 people in a room, maybe give yourself a few extra minutes, some flex space there. Great. So we're looking at my thought exchange room. I'm in here. And so we're going to go through how to create an exchange for live in the room. And to do that, we're going to click create. And here we are. So we've got our draft created. We're going to go into the question here. And so this is where we can ask our open-ended pluralized question. And so I know in our previous master classes, we've covered question design and introduction. I'm going to cover a few of those points, but if you want to dig in deeper, those have all been recorded. So you can go back and watch those again. There's some really good nuggets of information in there. And so the question I'm going to be asking you today, what are your thoughts and questions about facilitating live exchanges? So great question, open-ended and pluralized. The other piece, when you're designing your question, just flip it. Think about it from your participant's perspective. Is it easy for them to answer? If yes, you know you have a great question here. And so the other piece here is the introduction. This is a great opportunity to add some context to your exchange, to talk about why it's important people participate and what you're going to do with that information. So explaining how their voice is connected to decisions being made. We actually don't need to do that here because we're going to be live in the room. You can speak to that verbally. So we've got our question. We can hit save. And here we are. And so you can ask demographic questions in an exchange. My point that I want to share here is don't ask demographic questions unless it's absolutely necessary to understand your results. So if you really need to understand what's important to different stakeholders who are participating in these meetings, this is your opportunity to ask that. You can ask up to 5. When you ask demographics, it is mandatory for people to answer them in order to participate in the exchange. So I'm not going to ask any today because I want to remove one more barrier to you just getting into that exchange and adding some ideas here. Great. And so we're going to go now into the deadline. And so this is what we were speaking to a little bit earlier, that great question that came through live in the room. As Angela said, you want to give people about 8 to 10 minutes to share and rate thoughts. Depending on the size of the group, maybe you want to do 10 to 15 minutes here. And so you'll give people some time to share. Halfway through, you'll give them a prompt to continue rating thoughts, and you'll see us do that today as well. And so the other piece here that I wanted to touch on was the calendar feature. And so you can run an exchange live in the room. Maybe you've got a meeting or an open house, but everyone wasn't able to attend, and you really want that broad-based feedback. What you can do is extend the deadline of your exchange. So you could set it from, a week from now or a couple days from now. Set the deadline there and send it out by email to anyone who wasn't there, and they can now participate in your exchange. So it's a great way to kind of continue that conversation and capture all voices. Sign up or login required. All right, so live in the room, we always want to have this set to no. So we want people to be able to come straight into the exchange without needing to enter their email address. We don't want to waste precious minutes of our face-to-face time logging in. Well, and then hide reported thoughts. That's the last feature here. This speaks to community moderation in an exchange. It's something to consider depending on your topic. I recommend turning this to no in a live setting because it helps keep the conversation transparent. And what this means is if somebody reports a thought out of the conversation that they think was rude or off topic, it's going to stay in there until you review it as the leader. And so having that set to no in a live setting builds that transparency piece. If you're working with students, get in touch with us. We can talk through some additional considerations around moderation there. Great, and so we're ready to launch. So we're going to do that. And here we go. We've got our exchange. It now exists in the Thoughtexchange universe, but hasn't gone anywhere yet because we haven't invited anyone.
Can I just for a minute, Ailsa, I think one of the reasons why it's so valuable that you walked through the creation process here on this virtual event is, she talked about all of the whys, all of the reasons why you'd want to consider facilitating an event or an exchange at a live event, and then all of the wins when you might want to do it. The other thing I really just want to point out before you invite everyone into this is if it occurs to you in the middle of a live event, oh my gosh, you know what would be great for us to do? An exchange on this. That's how quickly you can do it. I mean, it's really just a matter of minutes because you're going to give the context, live in the room of why it's important and why they should participate and all of the things you would normally include in an introduction. You can just say those things. So really it's just a matter of taking 2 minutes tops probably to create this thing and then immediately send it out. So don't also think that you have to just always know before you walk into a live event, okay, this is when I'm going to do this exchange and this is when I'm going to do this exchange. The platform is so nimble that really at any moment when it occurs to you that it would be important to do an exchange, you can do it. And Ailsa has just illustrated how quickly you can create one.
That's great. Yeah, and that's exactly right. So we kind of walked through all the steps, but really all you need is your question and you need to have sign up set to off and you're golden. So to invite folks to your exchange, you're going to use this invite feature here. The link is great. If you're emailing that out, you can click it, copy it to your clipboard, and paste it in your email, send it to people. Or you can use it to create a QR code to help folks get into the exchange. And then the other piece here is the 9-digit code. And so that is great for live in the room. So you're going to send people to thoughtexchange.com/join and have them punch in the 9-digit code rather than this long link to get into the exchange. So I'm going to paste the link in the chat here to everyone. And then I'm also going to flip over to the PowerPoint slide and we're going to be updating that dynamically just so you can see the way you could use the slide in your own session. So we've got the link in the chat there. And then bear with me as I update the slide. You're getting a behind the scenes tour here.
This is how the sausage is made, right?
There we go. And perfect, we've got the code in there already and the QR code. So give me one moment here. There you go. So you've got options. So you've got the link in the chat and you could use your QR code here or go to thoughtexchange.com/join, punch in that 9-digit code and go ahead and start adding your thoughts or questions about facilitating live exchanges here. Yeah. And so I'm gonna, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, quick note, guys, if you open your camera and you zoom in on the QR code, something will pop down. You can click on it and go right into the exchange. If you've never done the QR code, that's just a quick tip on how you can utilize that to participate in the exchange.
That's great, thank you, Angela. So what we're going to do is, I've just demonstrated how easy it is to set up an exchange. And we always say the hardest part for us is being quiet, letting you participate. And so I'm going to be quiet, give you some time to share ideas and rate ideas. Please try and share at least 2 thoughts each and then try to rate around 20 thoughts. And then you can head in to discover the results. And so as everyone's participating, I'm just sharing my screen here so you can see the visualization of everyone engaging with one another. Basically what this is really where the magic happens. There's the star step here. You can see those orange lines representing the starring. This is where you're all thinking critically about your personal priorities and kind of building empathy I like to think of this as kind of a high level visualization of the exchange engagement you've created. It's how wide we've cast our engagement net here.
Mm-hmm. So to Chad's point, we'll give you guys just a few more minutes to get in there, share, star, discover, and then I'll walk Ailsa through the top thoughts report where we dive into all of these questions and thoughts that you guys have. What do you think, Ailsa? You ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay, good.
Hop on into the thoughts.
Yeah, I love that we can still see everybody in there engaging with everyone else. But this way you can hopefully we can get to everyone's questions and thoughts before the half-hour mark. So I think we should dive in now. Okay, here we go, guys. How do you deal with a live exchange that does not go as planned? How do you deal with mass complaining? I love this question. It's certainly something we hear a lot, I think, during either the facilitation portion of an exchange or during the sales process. So I love that we're going to start there. Ailsa, what do you recommend if things go kind of awry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where I would say this is part of that thought exchange exercise in vulnerability, right? Leaning into vulnerability. If people are complaining, there might be something going on in your team or your community. And so that helps you get a little bit of a finger on the pulse. I think also live in the room, we've got an opportunity to kind of verbally frame the conversation, right? This is our opportunity to brainstorm together. Like, tell us what the most important things that you want to focus on. And so helping frame that can help kind of direct the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think what we often find too is that, to Ailsa's point, if you're framing it correctly and you're saying like, listen, maybe we want to unearth some of these things, so help us help you with that. I think if you start in that space, a lot of people recognize that this is maybe an olive branch that you're sending. You're not kind of sticking your head in the sand, which is, I think, where a lot of frustration and mass complaining comes from. So I think even just the fact that you're asking really, I think, mitigates a lot of the idea of this mass complaining. It mostly stays solutions oriented, especially just from our experience in working with a number of different partners. We find that things that are really ugly or complain focused really don't usually go all the way to the top. There may be another thought in there that says that addresses the same issue or topic, but it's said in a much more positive way. And usually that one gets much more highly rated.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. If you have a thought exchange that already exists, can you use it for a live thought exchange? Want to be sure data is comprehensive of all submitted thoughts? This is a great question, Ailsa. What do you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I love it. So if you've run an exchange in the past and you've kind of closed it and put it aside, I'm inclined to say I wouldn't necessarily open that up again. Because if you're working with a different audience, it might not be transparent. They're coming into an exchange and seeing a whole bunch of ideas that maybe aren't theirs. And so it's something to be mindful of. I definitely recommend reaching out to your engagement coach or your client success manager to dig into that a little bit more. But what I would suggest is starting with a fresh exchange. And we've got some handy tools in the Discover dashboard. We could look at comparing results as well.
Good. I love this next question. And I think we have an opportunity here to kind of talk about it and show maybe some of the ways that you can do it. How do you skillfully facilitate the discover portion? How do you engage people beyond just reading the top thoughts report?
Love this question. So the first thing I would do is show that connections tab that we showed while you were all participating, right? And so that's giving that high level visualization of the engagement. It's eye-catching, it's fun to look at. Going through these top thoughts can be really powerful, especially if you're dealing with something that's maybe more contentious or people have burning questions. That's a great way to address things live in the room. There's other ways that we can use the tools as well. And I'm just going to flip over to the bar charts here. And so we have this brand new tool. I'm really excited about it. It's dynamic auto theming. And so while you were all participating, the machine was doing some theming for us, looking at keywords, and it pulled out some kind of key themes. So, piece around live exchanges. We wanted to know how to facilitate live sessions using the Discover dashboard. What are some tips for young people for engaging them, right? And so you could also use this to help kind of facilitate your discussion with people as well. So, I see we have some thoughts around how to engage students. You can pull up the thoughts and look at them. and start speaking to it more thematically as well. There are lots of great tools in here. We don't have time to dig into them all today, but by all means, reach out and we can talk about those in more detail.
Yeah, I think the differences tab is another really great one too. And so I know you're in an effort to save time, we won't dive into it, but yes, there's tons. And I know any of your engagement coaches or CSMs will help you through planning that. How do you skillfully, okay, we talked about that one. Are there any specific tips around using this for event feedback? Are there better or worse ways to ask about participant experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways you could do it. And so there's those questions I mentioned before. So you could ask, as a result of this event, I will. And I think that's kind of a new Thoughtexchange favorite that we have here. It's giving people some freedom to kind of declare, their commitments or that key pivotal moment that stuck out to them that they want to continue to action on. You could go with a more traditional route too, what are some things you liked about the event and some things we could improve for next time? And so there are different ways to use it. And I would say it always goes back to your goal. What is it that you need to know and how are you going to use that information to make progress? Is your goal to improve the event for next year? Or is your goal to help participants crystallize their learnings?
Yeah, that's great. So let's do this as the last one. Ailsa, and then I know in our last masterclass, one of the things that we talked about was in the recording that we send out, doing a leader report. So that gives you an opportunity to answer all of the questions. So this will be the last question we answer here live on this virtual event, but I'm hopeful that you can go through and give answers to all of these questions so our attendees can make sure all of their questions get answered.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Perfect. Okay, so let's use this as the last one. What are some ways to talk through the results at the end? I've heard the term closing the loop. What does this mean? Which is funny to me because we do say it to each other all the time internally in Thoughtexchange. So I'm anxious for Ailsa to kind of dive into what we really mean when we say this.
Yeah, so I like to think of it not necessarily as closing the loop, but wrapping up as a springboard for action, right? So what we're going to do today to our springboard for action, if you will, is like Angela said, we're going to use this feature here and I'm going to respond to all of your comments. And then I'm going to create a report to send back out to you. What that's doing is it's demonstrating that active listening piece. And so I heard you, here are responses. So that's one way you can share it back. Another way is to do some theming and create an interactive results website that you can share back out with people. Lots of opportunities to kind of close that loop, if you will, on those results. Sometimes you don't need to create a report if you were able to speak to it live in the room. But I think the key piece here is to commit to closure in some respect, right? To demonstrate active listening and move forward on your next steps together.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ailsa. I'm so hopeful that all of our attendees found this topic, facilitating live exchanges, to be really worthwhile. We certainly encourage you to be using Thoughtexchange in many ways in your organizations, but definitely in a live setting if you haven't already done it. And if you have, to continue to do so. If you would join us for our next TE Masterclass next week. And if you, I think, Ailsa, you mentioned that there's some office hours coming up. Can you talk to us about what that is?
Yeah, so I'll be sticking around after this session. So feel free to stay on, pop in. If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about them with you.
Great. So we'll send out the recording to this event so you can share it far and wide. Of course, Ailsa will do the leader report, so you'll have all of your questions answered. And we will see you back here on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific for our next TE Masterclass. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.